In the vast, silent depths of space, where stars were just shimmering specks of dust, a ridiculous question echoed through the galactic councils for centuries. What happens when a species, so technologically behind they still used internal combustion engines for some vehicles, repeatedly deceives and outsmarts forces capable of bending spacetime? This wasn't just science fiction. This was the unbelievably true story of humanity, a story of cunning, chaos, and a whole lot of creative lying. The Galactic Council, a gathering of beings so advanced their daily routines involved manipulating quantum realities, had a strict pecking order. Might made right, and technological prowess was the ultimate measure. Then came the humans, whose most impressive feat of engineering was arguably a self-folding pizza box. Their ships were held together with what looked suspiciously like duct tape. Their weapons spat glowing rocks that barely inconvenienced a proper starcruiser, and their strategic thinking often resembled throwing darts at a galactic map while blindfolded. Yet somehow these chaotic underdogs managed to consistently make the galaxy's elite look like utter fools, leaving them scratching their non-existent heads in bewildered frustration. In every council meeting, the mere mention of humanity would cause highly evolved energy beings to flicker nervously, and stoic crystalline lifeforms to subtly shift their facets in confusion. Even the venerable Elder Throm, a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 empires, would sigh audibly. "Humans," he'd murmur, his ancient voice filled with a perplexing mix of exasperation and grudging admiration. "They are less a species, and more a cosmic headache." Because humans, with the audacity of a caffeinated squirrel facing a starship, managed to confound empires that had existed for epochs. Their battle plans were insane. Their advanced technology seemed to malfunction more often than it worked, and their victories were so improbable they bordered on the miraculous, and often the downright embarrassing for their opponents. Take, for instance, the esteemed General Thrax of the Krill hegemony, a warrior whose name was synonymous with swift and brutal conquest across 3 galaxies. He decided to make an example of the upstart humans with a swift, decisive raid on their outer colonies. His warships, sleek obsidian blades against the starry canvas, tore through the pathetic human picket lines with contemptuous ease. Thrax chuckled in his command chamber, a sound like grinding rocks, imagining the terrified primitives scurrying before his might. Victory seemed as assured as the next sunrise. He even had his favorite victory celebratory meal, a platter of sentient algae, prepared. But then came the baffling reports from his scout ships, their comms filled with static and panic. "Sir, we are detecting an anomaly. It appears to be a giant space squid made of light, and it's singing opera. Very badly, I might add." General Thrax nearly choked on his nutrient paste. A giant space squid singing opera. His intelligence officer, a multi-eyed creature named Xylos, stammered. "The sensors indicate it's emitting highly complex sonic vibrations, potentially a new form of psychic weapon. Or perhaps an unknown artistic attack." Thrax, a veteran of 1,000 battles, knew one thing: space squids didn't sing opera. Unless the humans had somehow weaponized interdimensional marine life and given it a taste for Puccini. His meticulously planned invasion ground to a halt as his fleet cautiously circled the singing squid, unsure whether to attack, applaud, or simply question their life choices. The squid, as it turned out, was a cleverly projected hologram from a jury-rigged human freighter, powered by an enthusiastic and slightly unhinged engineer named Jackson Jax Miller. Jax, a self-proclaimed galactic audio-visual maestro, had repurposed an old civilian entertainment projector and hooked it up to his personal collection of Earth's most ear-splitting opera recordings. He even had his pet ferret, Sparky, gnawing on a loose wire to create random, alarming energy spikes. This wasn't an isolated incident. The galaxy was littered with similar tales of human absurdity, triumphing over logic and firepower. The truth was, humanity was the kid who showed up to a galactic chess tournament with a deck of exploding playing cards. They were late to the party, their technology was laughably outdated, and their understanding of galactic politics was roughly equivalent to a goldfish's understanding of astrophysics. Their initial attempts at interstellar diplomacy were often awkward, sometimes comical, and occasionally ended with minor galactic incidents. They once tried to pay a proud Valarian trade delegation with shiny bottle caps, genuinely convinced they were valuable currency. During a diplomatic summit with the stoic Grolac Empire, their automatic translator accidentally replaced all instances of peace with delicious pudding, leading to several confused and slightly offended Grolac generals. Yet through this chaotic bumbling, a pattern began to emerge. When cornered, humans didn't just fight back, they did something utterly, wonderfully weird. They learned from every near disaster, every humiliating defeat. They analyzed their opponents, not just their technology, but their psychology. They realized that beings who relied on logic and order were utterly defenseless against the illogical and the absurd. If a species expects you to attack, you sing opera. If they expect you to retreat, you pretend to have a planet-destroying butter churn. And so, the art of the bluff became their most potent weapon, perfected through trial, error, and an unhealthy amount of sheer stubbornness. Their mastery of improvisation was legendary. They could fix critical life support systems with chewing gum, a paperclip, and a desperate plea to whatever deity was listening. Their scientists, often mocked for their primitive methodologies by their alien counterparts who used quantum-entangled thought processes, had a knack for stumbling upon breakthroughs that the galaxy's finest minds had overlooked, usually by accident. And when all else failed, they could lie with such earnest conviction that you'd start questioning your own reality, wondering if perhaps a singing space squid really was a legitimate tactical asset. They weaponized rumors, turning every minor success into a galaxy-wide legend of hidden capabilities. A broken engine that emitted strange lights. It became a prototype reality-warping device. A desperate scramble for resources. It was respun as a covert training exercise for our super soldiers. They exploited the superstitions and ancient fears of races that had long forgotten the meaning of vulnerability, often inventing new ones on the spot. And they did it all with a sense of utterly unself-conscious audacity that was both baffling and secretly terrifying to behold. It was as if they simply expected their outlandish claims to be believed, and somehow, by sheer force of will, they often were. Their first grand spectacle of deception, truly cementing their reputation, was the legend of the quantum entanglement cannon. This took place during a critical border dispute with the reptilian Zidonian Confederacy, whose ships bristled with enough firepower to vaporize small moons. Humanity's fleet, led by the pragmatic and eternally weary commander Eva Rostova, knew a direct fight was suicide. They had barely enough fuel to get home, let alone fight a pitched battle. So Eva approved Chief Engineer Kalen Vance's most outlandish proposal yet. Kalen, a brilliant but eccentric mind, leaked a rumor, a whisper in the galactic ether, amplified by strategically placed leaks in their own barely functional information networks. He claimed to have developed a weapon that exploited the very fabric of reality, a cannon that could target a Zidonian ship light years away by entangling its quantum state with a device that could be detonated at will. The specifics were deliberately vague, riddled with pseudo-scientific jargon that sounded just convincing enough to induce a headache. He talked about chronal displacement matrices and tachyon resonance cascades with a straight face, even though he'd pulled most of the terms from old Earth sci-fi novels. The Zidonians, a species that prided itself on its rigorous scientific method and unwavering logic, were thrown into utter disarray. Their best physicists argued for weeks, locked in high-level debates, trying to determine if such a weapon was even theoretically possible. The very uncertainty was enough. Faced with the potential of their ships being spontaneously erased from existence by an invisible, undetectable force, the Zidonian fleet hesitated. Commander Rostova watched on her bridge as the Zidonian attack fleet, which moments ago was charging forward, suddenly held position, their formation tightening in hesitant confusion. This hesitation gave the humans the precious time they needed to evacuate their threatened colonies and regroup. The quantum entanglement cannon never existed, but the fear it instilled was as real as any physical weapon, causing the Zidonian command to send frantic messages back to their home world, demanding immediate research into theoretical quantum entanglement weapon countermeasures, essentially inventing a problem for themselves based on a human lie. Then there was the biomimetic plague scare against the insectoid Kruthic swarm. The Kruthic, a relentless tide of chitin and claws, overwhelmed their enemies through sheer numbers, their hive mind relentless in its pursuit of expansion. Facing an imminent swarm invasion of a vital human agricultural world, a planet ironically named Eden 7 that was crucial for human food supplies, humanity deployed no new weapons, no massive defenses. Instead, they dispatched a single, heavily armored transport, piloted by the always calm Captain Ben Carter, a man whose unflappable demeanor was his greatest asset. Inside, the transport contained not soldiers, but hundreds of thousands of genetically engineered space butterflies. These weren't weaponized butterflies. They were ordinary Lepidoptera, modified by a team of slightly mad human geneticists to carry harmless, brightly colored spores that shimmered beautifully in the vacuum of space. However, as Captain Carter's transport flew directly into the path of the advancing Kruthic swarm, the humans simultaneously broadcast panicked warnings on all frequencies. The message, delivered by an AI voice programmed to sound increasingly frantic, warned of a highly virulent, rapidly mutating bioplague that would turn all Kruthic into fluffy, brightly colored space moths. The broadcast even included fabricated sensor readings, showing rapidly spreading mutagenic particles, the spores, latching onto Kruthic scout ships. The image of their fierce, terrifying warriors being transformed into something resembling oversized, glittery insects, eternally fluttering and consuming nectar, was enough to give the Kruthic hive mind a collective, existential shudder. The invasion was called off immediately, as the swarm nervously awaited further developments in space Lepidopteran pathology, devoting massive resources to developing anti-moth protocols. Captain Carter, meanwhile, calmly piloted his now empty butterfly carrier back to base, enjoying a cup of lukewarm coffee. And who could forget the temporal echo minefield that thwarted the expansionist ambitions of the energy-based Luminary Collective? The Luminary, beings of pure light and energy, could phase through physical obstacles, making conventional minds useless. They were logical, efficient, and completely baffled by human unpredictability. So the humans, under the guidance of Professor Evelyn Reed, a theoretical physicist with a dry wit and an affinity for paradoxes, claimed to have created minds that didn't exist in normal spacetime, but rather in a series of fleeting temporal echoes. Triggering one, they claimed, could create unpredictable ripples in the time stream, potentially erasing Luminary ships from history, or even worse, making them experience Tuesdays, repeatedly, for eternity. Professor Reed personally supervised the deployment of these minds, which were, in reality, just very old, decommissioned human drones equipped with faulty temporal distortion units that produced harmless, sporadic flickers in local time. But the humans accompanied this with a broadcast filled with highly complex, deliberately confusing temporal physics equations and dramatic sound effects of temporal dislocation. The sheer absurdity of the threat, combined with some convincingly fake temporal distortions around a few strategically placed human drones, was enough to make the cautious Luminary reconsider their planned incursions into human-held space. Their internal debates focused on the existential dread of being stuck in an infinite Tuesday, a concept so horrifying it superseded any military objective. The Luminary, ever logical, decided that even a small chance of temporal paradox was not worth the risk. They were beings of light and order. Chaotic time loops were simply not in their operational manual. These individual acts of audacious deception built a legend. The galaxy whispered tales of the humans, the weakling species with the universe's most overactive imagination, and a seemingly infinite capacity for utterly bizarre trickery. Every alien commander facing humans had to contend not just with their ships and weapons, but with the terrifying uncertainty of what ridiculous bluff they might be pulling next. One general was said to have developed a nervous tic whenever the word human was mentioned. Another species, the highly methodical Cylons, reportedly began incorporating random absurdity protocols into their combat simulations, just in case they encountered humanity. Even during diplomatic negotiations, humans exuded an aura of unpredictable potential. They would casually mention certain unorthodox defense strategies we are exploring, or allude to cultural practices that might seem alarming to other species, all while sipping on what appeared to be perfectly innocent, yet strangely glowing, beverages. They didn't explicitly threaten, but the implication was always there. Try us, and you might just end up facing a giant rubber duck filled with antimatter. Or discover your entire fleet has been subtly reprogrammed to perform synchronized ballet with a surprisingly catchy soundtrack. This constant drip feed of misinformation and implied threats created a pervasive sense of unease. Other species, who relied on data, logic and quantifiable power, found themselves unable to categorize humanity. They were not strong by conventional metrics, yet they consistently defied all logical outcomes. This mental dissonance was a weapon in itself. The galaxy began to perceive humans not just as survivors, but as dangerous wildcards, a species whose true limits were unknown and perhaps unknowable. The psychological effect was profound. No one wanted to be the one to find out what humanity was truly capable of, especially when it involved opera-singing squids or existential Tuesdays. This brings us to the ultimate test, the moment when humanity's bluff would face its severest challenge. The Vorgon Imperium, a vast and ancient empire with unparalleled military might and an unyielding will, had watched humanity's antics with growing disdain. They were a species of conquerors who crushed defiance with overwhelming force and viewed theatrics as a sign of weakness. They believed they had finally deciphered humanity's trick. They were just good at bluffing. They decided it was time to call that bluff, once and for all, and deliver a lesson in galactic reality. Their armada, a terrifying spectacle of chrome and shadow, blotted out entire constellations as it advanced towards the human home system. Their flagship, the Imperator's Wrath, a vessel the size of a small moon, alone possessed enough firepower to glass a dozen planets. Their intelligence reports, compiled by cold, calculating Vorgon analysts, confidently declared that humanity had no hidden superweapons, no unseen fleets, and no cosmic entities at their beck and call. It was all a facade, a flimsy curtain. They intended to expose it, and then utterly annihilate humanity with extreme prejudice. This was not just a military campaign, it was a cosmic execution. Humanity knew this was it. Every sensor, every frantic intelligence report confirmed the Vorgon's absolute intent. This time there was no secret spaceship to convert, no conveniently located asteroid field to hide in, no complex signals to broadcast to fool a highly motivated and prepared enemy. This was not a bluff. This was the brutal reality of their technological inferiority meeting a superior force head-on. There was no trick left in their usual bag of antics. They were truly, utterly outmatched. Panic rippled through the human fleet, families on Earth huddled in shelters, bracing for the end. Even Commander Rostova, typically unflappable, felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "This is it, isn't it, Kalen?" she murmured to her chief engineer, who was frantically tinkering with a salvaged alien comms unit. Kalen just grunted. "Not until we've tried everything, Commander, even the really stupid ideas." But even in the face of absolute annihilation, humanity's spirit, their core essence, did not waver. They gathered their remaining fleets, their oldest ships, their bravest pilots, some of whom were barely out of flight school. They knew they would fall, but they would fall fighting, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could pull off one last impossible, incredibly bizarre bluff that would make the Vorgons pause, even for a moment. As the massive Vorgon fleet prepared for its final decisive charge, closing in on Earth like a hungry maw, a single battered human frigate, barely holding together from previous skirmishes, broke formation. It was the Reluctant Duckling, a ship notorious for its frequent breakdowns, and the slightly unhinged crew that kept it flying. On its hull, someone had hastily spray-painted in gigantic, deliberately misspelled galactic common, the words, "We has a button. Do not push." And then, with a sputtering of its ancient engines, it charged directly towards the Imperator's Wrath. This was not a suicidal attack. It was Jax Miller's, the opera-singing squid guy, latest masterpiece of desperate, final psychological warfare. Over the main galactic comms, a voice, calm and resolute, belonging to the human fleet commander, broadcast a message. It wasn't a surrender. It wasn't a plea. It was a chilling yet almost gleeful declaration. Vorgon Imperium, the voice began, belonging to a surprisingly young cadet Leia Thorne, whose usual duties involved organizing the ship's snack rations. She was filling in for the main comms officer who had, quite understandably, fainted. "You believe you understand us. You believe our strength lies in illusions. You are gravely mistaken. Our true power is not in what we possess, but in what we are willing to do. Especially if it involves a really tempting, shiny red button." The Vorgon commander, a being of pure, cold logic, was momentarily stunned by the sheer childishness of the message. A button. "What is the meaning of this primitive display?" he rumbled, his multifaceted eyes narrowing in confusion. Cadet Thorne's voice, surprisingly steady, grew colder, more distant, as if reciting something from a forgotten nightmare. "We have developed a final protocol, Vorgon. A last resort. It's called the Apocalypse Seed. It is not a weapon of destruction against you, it is a weapon against ourselves. A device designed to destabilize the very fabric of our solar system's star. If our defeat is absolute, if our extinction is certain, then the Apocalypse Seed will activate. Our star will undergo an immediate, irreversible gravitational collapse, transforming into a micro-singularity. This singularity will then expand, consuming our entire solar system in a wave of gravitational anomalies and quantum distortions. And it will not stop there. Oh no, it absolutely will not stop there. It will ripple outward, creating a cascade effect that will destabilize your entire sector, turning your star systems into chaotic, unpredictable gravitational anomalies for centuries. Your victory, Vorgon, will be the beginning of your own cosmic chaos. A meaningless conquest of a broken, self-devouring star system, leading to the gradual annihilation of your own territories. And the button is just so tempting. Silence descended upon the Vorgon bridge, a silence heavier than a dying star. The commander, who had dismissed all human bluffs as mere trickery, felt a chill that no space heater could dispel. This wasn't a threat of a weapon against them. It was a threat of self-destruction, a commitment to annihilation so profound that it would drag their conquerors down with them in a slow, agonizing cosmic decay. Their highly logical minds struggled to comprehend such an act. Why would a species choose to utterly destroy itself and its home, knowing it would also cause indirect, long-term harm to its enemy? It defied all rational understanding. It was insane. It was human. Impossible, the Vorgon commander roared, slamming a clawed fist onto his console. No species would choose such a path. It is illogical. Self-defeating. Cadet Thorne's voice, now tinged with a mischievous, almost gleeful note, was unwavering. You underestimate our stubbornness, Vorgon. Our will to ensure that even in defeat, we leave a mark that cannot be erased. We will not be a conquest. We will be a warning. About that button, it's really close to my hand now. Like, almost touching it. Activate the Apocalypse Seed if they do not withdraw. The battered human frigate, the reluctant duckling, still charging, pulsed with an almost imperceptible, yet unsettling energy signature. It was, in fact, just an old power converter overheating. But the Vorgon's perception was already warped by the horrifying thought of the button. They imagined quantum fluctuations, black holes winking into existence, and the fabric of space-time unraveling, because some human intern decided to push a button. The Vorgon scientists frantically analyzed the human claim. They had no data on an Apocalypse Seed. It sounded fantastical, impossible. Yet, the humans' calm conviction, their apparent willingness to commit cosmic suicide, instilled a unique terror. The logical flaw in the humans' plan, that it would harm themselves more than the Vorgons, was precisely what made it believable to the Vorgons. No rational species would bluff with such a self-destructive outcome, unless it was absolutely, horrifyingly real. The idea of losing valuable star systems, even if slowly, simply because a human cadet pushed a button, was intolerable. The Vorgon commander, a pragmatist at heart, made a decision that went against every instinct of conquest, but in favor of preservation. "Cease fire," he bellowed, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Full retreat. Do not engage. Reroute all fleets. This sector is not worth the cost. We will not risk the button." The Vorgon Imperium, shaken to its core by humanity's unprecedented, gloriously suicidal bluff involving a very tempting button, retreated. They left human space, not in victory, but in utter confusion, profound disquiet, and a collective shuddering fear of small, innocuous objects. Other alien races, observing this bizarre turn of events, now looked at humanity with a new, unsettling respect. They were no longer just weak or cunning. They were dangerously unpredictable and willing to go to unimaginable lengths, even if those lengths involved cosmic self-annihilation, triggered by a simple push. The rumors surrounding humanity now became absolute certainties. A species that would sacrifice its very existence to spite its enemies, and might even enjoy doing it. In the aftermath, the galaxy tried to make sense of what had happened. News cycles were dominated by discussions of the apocalypse seed and the button, weapons that never truly existed, but which had effectively ended the largest invasion in recent memory. No one dared to question their reality anymore. The fear was too deeply ingrained. Highly respected academic journals debated the ethics of button-based warfare. Humanity's new position in the galaxy was undeniable. No longer dismissed as a minor species, they were now treated with extreme caution, often with a hint of awe, and a healthy dose of nervous laughter. Their diplomacy took on a new edge. Every negotiation was tinged with the unspoken threat of their final solution, which might involve a highly inconvenient cosmic anomaly. They were still technologically behind, but their reputation had given them a unique, almost untouchable status. Alien envoys would often arrive at human diplomatic missions carrying gifts of oddly shaped, highly durable buttons, as a strange form of appeasement. They didn't need to build the biggest guns or the fastest ships. They had built something far more powerful, a legacy of unpredictable defiance, a reputation for being the species that would always find a way to make their opponents hesitate, to question, to fear, and perhaps to wonder what other shiny objects humanity might have access to. And so, humanity, the master of the bluff, the connoisseur of cosmic chaos, continued its journey through the stars. They proved that true power isn't always in firepower or numbers. It's in the mind, in the unwavering, borderline insane will, and in the ability to convince your enemy that you hold cards they cannot possibly comprehend, especially if those cards involve a very, very tempting button. They changed the galactic landscape forever, not through conquest but through the ingenious, terrifying and utterly hilarious art of the bluff. And in the silent depths of space, countless species whispered the name of humanity, a name now synonymous with unpredictability, unconquerable spirit, and a profound disquiet whenever they saw a simple, red button.